Cyclopean architecture, for instance. He's writing about things, he's using Greek and Roman terms, and he's throwing them around like mad to create this bizarre landscape that would be almost physically impossible to reproduce. Crowley, in October of 1907, is doing precisely the same thing, using precisely the same type of language to describe his experiences during these rituals and the rituals themselves. It's eerie, and in a book that I had published a little while ago called The Dark Lord, I actually put the passages side by side so you can see them.
And how similar are they? Because I've read a lot of Crowley, and usually he writes in if it isn't sometimes disjointed, but it's usually very direct.
Sure.
In the way that Crowley writes. But Lovecraft, completely the opposite. He likes long, convoluted plot lines and, as you said, landscapes and such. So how similar, when you put these two pieces side by side, were they?
Well, they're very similar. I mean, as I pointed out in The Dark Lord, by comparing them, you're talking about someone who's writing using this same Lovecraftian terminology. The terminology itself, the darkness, the wastelands, the things that are growing out of nowhere, the beings that cannot really be described, all of this is there in this very brief set of very small rituals that Crowley is working with, that he's creating as he goes along at that time. And it looks like he's just writing another Lovecraft story. Except that in 1907, Lovecraft was just starting to write the short stories for which he would eventually become famous. So the contact wasn't there between the two men at all. And even, this is the kicker to this whole thing, even during these stories that Crowley is writing, he comes across a word, he hears a word, Crowley, that he writes down, and to the end of his days, he never could figure out what that word meant. And the word was Cthulhu.
Oh my God. Oh, you just gave me a chill.
And I probably would not have used the phrase, oh my God, at that moment, but hey,
Yeah, well, you would have come up with far more eloquent words than I have.
No, it's just that Cthulhu, and my God, I don't know. Crowley might have agreed with you. But you had Cthulhu in Crowley's, language, and you have Cthulhu in Lovecraft's, language, and Lovecraft had heard that word himself. He was trying to duplicate something. He thought it was like a guttural shout, in a sense, something that could not be formed by the human larynx and the human, tongue and teeth. It was something that was completely different. And Crowley, on the other hand, on the same day that fictional ritual is taking place, Crowley's doing a real ritual, and in contact with a being with almost the same name. It's one of these things that you can't make it up.
No, you can't. And what keeps coming to mind for me right now is quantum entanglement. It seems like their consciousnesses were somehow quantum entangled, where one is picking up on the other, or the other is picking up on something that the other's going to do in the future or something. I mean, this is a very weird connection that the two have.
Exactly. And these are people who really didn't know about each other. I don't think Crowley knew about the existence of Lovecraft. It's possible. Lovecraft had heard about Crowley. He mentioned him once or twice in his correspondence or something, but there's no way that Crowley would have read those rituals there's no way Lovecraft would have read the rituals Crowley wrote down, because those books were privately printed when they were printed, and passed around a very select small circle of friends. And in fact, Crowley got in trouble for those rituals that he had written down, because they seemed to reveal a secret of a German secret society called the Ordo Templi Orientis, the OTO. Mm-hmm. And the leaders of the OTO had gone to Crowley and say, why are you revealing our secrets? And Crowley said, how can I reveal your secrets? I'm not initiated to that degree. And they pointed to it, and then they went ahead and initiated him, and the rest is history. Crowley eventually took over leadership of the OTO years and years later. Mm-hmm. So there was a connection there to the secret society that he would eventually control, which was global. I mean, it was based in Europe, but they had branches in Canada, the United States, and in Asia. So you have, these connections going on, connections within connections. And there's Lovecraft just writing his stories in Providence and in Brooklyn. And the funny thing is, on top of all of that, The Call of Cthulhu was written at a time when Lovecraft was in Brooklyn Heights, and his apartment was robbed. And his apartment was robbed in such a way that whoever robbed it had the key. They came into his apartment while he was sleeping and basically robbed everything he had that was of any value, including his winter coat and everything else. So all this tension, all this paranoia, all this stress is building inside of Lovecraft.
Right.
He hates where he's living. He's living under dire circumstances. And the people in his building he feels are Arabs, of some kind, perhaps the Yazidi.
Well, and he's also suffered loss at a very young age. He also, in a sense, feels like that the people around him and that life essentially around him is out to get him. And so this lends to a kind of a dark mindset.
Sure. Yeah, and plus he was married during this period for 2 years, and it was not a marriage that worked out very well. They were broke most of the time. His wife eventually got a job out of state in Ohio, I believe, in Cincinnati, if I'm not mistaken, and basically left him in Brooklyn, and eventually they did divorce. So he had a brief foray into married life, but it didn't last very long. And then he wound up back in Providence with a sigh of relief, sort of, and was stationed there and wrote the rest of his stories there. He did, however, travel through the United States, and this travel comes up in the Lovecraft Code because I realized that with all of his weirdness, with all the strange stuff that he was channeling, he did manage to go down to Key West in Florida, and possibly, I have no proof of